Crocodile Dundee became a box office phenomenon, grossing more than $300 million worldwide in 1986. The film turned a rugged guy from the Australian outback into a global superstar overnight and brought the rest of the cast into the spotlight as well. But what happened to these people after the cameras stopped rolling will surprise you even more than a crocodile leaping out of the water. Let's begin. Number 1. Starting with John Meillon. John Meillon, who played Walter "Wally" Reilly. Wally is a cheerful, smooth-talking, and slightly sly tour guide. The kind of outback man who always knows how to tell stories, crack jokes, and lead travelers across the wild regions of Australia as if it were his own backyard. Wally appears as a close friend of Mick Dundee, bringing a sense of everyday humor and authentic Aussie flavor to the story. John Meillon portrayed the character when he was about 52 years old, appearing in both films of the Crocodile Dundee series. Interestingly, Meillon was not a new face. Before the film was released, he had already been one of the veteran actors of Australian cinema, active since the 1940s, and appearing in many notable works such as Walkabout and Wake in Fright. For him, Crocodile Dundee was like the moment when the world finally recognized a face that had devoted decades to the screen. Meillon's distinctive, deep, husky voice even became a familiar sound in Australian commercials and television programs for many decades. Behind that long career was a life full of ups and downs. He went through 2 marriages, including one with actress June Salter before they eventually divorced. Sadly, John Meillon passed away in 1989 at the age of 55 due to liver disease, not long after the success of Crocodile Dundee brought his name to audiences around the world. Although he passed away relatively early, he is still remembered as one of the representative faces of classic Australian cinema, and Wally Reilly remains a familiar, warm image that audiences do not easily forget. Number 2. David Gulpilil, who played Neville Bell. Neville is the calm yet sharp Aboriginal man whom Sue Charlton encounters in the Outback, a quiet character carrying a sense of mystery and the confidence of someone who has lived his entire life among the wild. Just a few brief lines from Neville in Crocodile Dundee were enough to make audiences remember him forever, especially the moment when he refuses to have his photo taken for cultural reasons. This role was portrayed by David Gulpilil when he was about 33 years old in 1986. In fact, before appearing in this film, Gulpilil had already been an important figure in the wave of new Australian cinema. He was discovered in 1971 when director Nicholas Roeg saw the young Yolngu man hunting and performing traditional dances and invited him to star in Walkabout, launching a career that would last nearly 50 years. Thanks to his natural presence and indescribable charisma, he became one of the first Aboriginal actors to bring Indigenous Australian culture to international screens. But behind the spotlight was a life full of turbulence. Gulpilil struggled with alcohol addiction and legal troubles setbacks that caused his career to veer off course several times. Near the end of his life, he was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer in 2017 and withdrew from acting. David Gulpilil passed away on November 29, 2021, at the age of 68, leaving behind a great legacy, one of the greatest Indigenous actors in Australian cinema, a towering giant of world film. Number 3. Next is Steve Rackman, who played Donk. Donk is the burly man guarding the bar in the Outback, the kind of character who only needs to appear for a few minutes to be instantly remembered by the audience, thanks to his gigantic build, rugged face, and the attitude of don't start trouble unless you want problems. In Crocodile Dundee 1986, Donk is the man whom Mick Dundee knocks out with a single simple throw, a brief scene that became one of the film's classic action comedy moments. The character was played by Steve Crusher Rackman when he was about 31 years old, and interestingly, he continued to portray Donk in the next 2 installments of the Crocodile Dundee series in 1988 and 2001. But Rackman did not come from a film background. Before stepping onto a movie set, he was a well-known professional wrestler in Australia, competing under the nickname Crusher. In the 1970s, Rackman wrestled alongside many big names in the wrestling world and even faced the legendary Andre the Giant, becoming a familiar face on Australian television. Because of that, when he appeared in Crocodile Dundee, his massive physique and tough streetwise demeanor hardly required any acting. After the success of the film series, Rackman appeared in more than 40 films and many television commercials, but eventually he stepped away from the Hollywood spotlight to return to a simpler life. He opened and ran a gym in Coogee, Sydney, where people could easily spot the former wrestler who once became recognizable worldwide for his role as Donk. Rackman is now 71 years old. He still remains connected to his Australian roots and occasionally appears at fan events and reunion gatherings celebrating the film's lasting legacy. Number 4, we come to Mark Blum, who played Richard Mason, the polished and sophisticated New York editor, the successful boyfriend of journalist Sue Charlton, representing the ambitious urban world that stands in complete contrast to Mick Dundee's free-spirited nature. With his neatly tailored suits, sharp voice, and somewhat arrogant attitude, Richard is exactly the kind of character audiences find both familiar and difficult to like. Mark Blum took on the role when he was 36 years old. At the time he joined the film, Blum was beginning to gain attention in Hollywood. Just a year earlier, he had made an impression in the hit film Desperately Seeking Susan 1985 alongside Madonna and Crocodile Dundee, further helped make him a familiar face in 1980s cinema. However, the stage was truly Blum's home. He was highly active on Broadway and off-Broadway, even winning an Obie Award for theater in 1989, a testament to the artistic reputation he built within the theater community. Behind that enduring career was a rather private life. Blum married actress Janet Zarish and spent most of his time in New York, where he both performed and taught acting to younger generations. But no one could have expected that his journey of more than 4 decades would end so suddenly. Mark Blum passed away on March 25, 2020, at the age of 69 due to complications from COVID-19 during the early days of the pandemic in New York. His death shocked both Broadway and Hollywood. Richard Mason may have lost the girl to Mick Dundee, but Mark Blum earned the lasting respect of everyone who ever worked with him. Number 5. Next is Reginald VelJohnson, who played Garfield, or as he is often called in the film, Gus the friendly limousine driver in New York, one of the first people to treat Mick Dundee kindly when he arrives in the unfamiliar city. With his gentle smile, warm voice, and very down-to-earth sense of humor, Garfield becomes the kind of supporting character that immediately makes the audience feel at ease amid the chaotic urban setting. The role was portrayed by Reginald VelJohnson when he was 34 years old in 1986, at a time when he was still a nearly unknown face in Hollywood with only a few small roles before that. However, what no one expected was that just 2 years later, VelJohnson would break out with the role of Sergeant Al Powell in Die Hard 1988, one of the most beloved police characters in action film history. After that, he became even more familiar to television audiences when he played Carl Winslow in the sitcom Family Matters, which ran for nearly a decade and more than 200 episodes. Behind the kind appearance on screen is a steady career, but a rather private personal life. VelJohnson has largely stayed away from scandals and focused on acting for decades. What surprises many people is that he still remains very active, from voice acting in animated productions, appearing in television series, to participating in Dancing with the Stars in 2024. Currently, Reginald VelJohnson is 74 years old and remains one of the most recognizable faces in the history of American television. Nearly 40 years after Crocodile Dundee, Reginald VelJohnson is still remembered as Hollywood's kind-hearted guy, and for many viewers, Gus was one of the first people to welcome Mick Dundee into the chaotic yet very human world of New York. Number 6. Clarke, who played Simone the American, woman who appears in a bar in New York, a friendly, slightly bold woman with a touch of mystery representing the colorful nightlife of the city that Mick Dundee enters for the first time. Although it was only a small role, Simone still left an impression thanks to her natural presence and confident demeanor. Clarke took on the role when she was 34 years old. Before appearing in Crocodile Dundee, Clarke had already been known to movie audiences for her role as Valerian in the fantasy film Dragon Slayer 1981, a strong and unconventional female character for that time. Trained formally at the Yale School of Drama, Clarke belonged to the classical stage actor type, technically solid, elegant in demeanor, and always returning to the theater despite having opportunities in Hollywood. After a few years working in film and television, she gradually returned to the Broadway stage and regional theater, where she was truly highly regarded by critics. Behind that artistic career was a rather quiet fate. Clarke had no children and lived a private life, and in her youth she was once involved with playwright and comedian Lewis Black. Sadly, in 2000, she was diagnosed with ovarian cancer and had to withdraw from acting to return to Pittsburgh to teach drama. Caitlin Clarke passed away on September 9, 2004, at the age of 52, leaving behind the image of a talented actress of the American stage. Number 7. Nancy Allen appeared in the world of Crocodile Dundee as a quintessential New York face, a confident city woman, representing the glamorous social class that Mick Dundee must become familiar with after leaving the Outback. Although it was only a small role within the city setting, Allen's presence was still easy to notice thanks to her sharp demeanor and distinctly 1980s Hollywood beauty. At the time the film was released in 1986, Nancy Allen was about 36 years old and was already a familiar face in American cinema. In fact, Allen had been famous long before that. She made a strong impression in Carrie, 1976, and especially in several films by director Brian De Palma, such as Dressed to Kill, 1980. Just 1 year after Crocodile Dundee, she stepped into another iconic role, police officer Anne Lewis in RoboCop 1987, one of the most memorable female characters in science fiction action films. Behind the spotlight was a personal life marked by many turning points. Allen was once married to director Brian De Palma, later went through 2 more marriages, and eventually chose to live quite privately. In recent years, she has stepped away from the pace of Hollywood, taking part in charitable activities and supporting community work. Although not a central face of Crocodile Dundee, Nancy Allen still represents the strong generation of Hollywood actresses from the 1970s and 1980s. Number 8, we have Paul Hogan, who played Mick Crocodile Dundee. Mick stepped onto the screen like a living legend of the Outback, a man wearing a crocodile skin hat, carrying a massive knife at his side, and facing the world with a smile that was half mischievous and half gentle. In Crocodile Dundee 1986, Mick is a crocodile hunter, a man who lives in the wild but then walks into New York like someone out of his time. And it is precisely that sincerity that captivated audiences around the world. Paul Hogan portrayed the role at the age of 46, and what is especially notable is that he was also the film's co-creator and co-writer, turning the character of Dundee into a cultural icon of Australia. Before the film was made, Hogan had already become famous in his homeland thanks to the television comedy program The Paul Hogan Show in the 1970s. But Crocodile Dundee was the true breakthrough. The film grossed more than $300 million worldwide, while Hogan won the Golden Globe for Best Actor and received an Academy Award nomination for Best Original Screenplay. Behind the image of the cheerful Outback man lies a life with quite a few ups and downs. Hogan was married 3 times, including a marriage to his co-star Linda Kozlowski, who played Sue Charlton before they divorced in 2014. He was also involved in a years-long tax investigation that made his private life quite stressful. Today, Paul Hogan has reached the age of 86, living rather quietly in the United States and largely staying away from the film industry. But the legacy he left behind is unmistakable. Mick Dundee is not just a movie character, but a global symbol of the Australian spirit, humorous, tough, and free in the wild. Number 9, and finally Linda Kozlowski, who played Sue Charlton. Sue Charlton is the sharp urban journalist who steps into the Outback with a notebook and limitless curiosity. In Crocodile Dundee 1986, it is she who tracks down the story of the man who survived a crocodile attack, then accidentally brings Mick Dundee to the world stage and also becomes the person standing between 2 worlds, civilized New York and the wilds of Australia. With her elegant beauty, intelligent gaze, and independent demeanor, Sue becomes the perfect counterbalance to Dundee's straightforward nature. Linda Kozlowski took on the role when she was about 28 years old, and the character of Sue appeared throughout all 3 films in the Crocodile Dundee series. Before becoming globally famous, Kozlowski actually came from the New York theater scene and had performed in Death of a Salesman on Broadway, later appearing in the television adaptation alongside Dustin Hoffman. But Crocodile Dundee was the biggest turning point, turning her into one of the familiar faces of late 1980s cinema. What especially caught the audience's attention was that the real-life story almost repeated what happened on screen. Linda Kozlowski and Paul Hogan developed feelings while making the film, married in 1990, and had a son. However, after many years together, they divorced in 2014. After leaving Hollywood because she was dissatisfied with the roles she was offered, Kozlowski completely changed direction. She co-founded a luxury travel company in Morocco. Today, Linda Kozlowski is 68 years old and lives a fairly private life. But for movie audiences, Sue Charlton remains an image inseparable from the legend of Crocodile Dundee, the woman who opened the door for an Outback man to step out into the world. Among the stories that were just mentioned, which character impressed you the most? Please leave your thoughts in the comments so everyone can join the discussion. If there is a movie you would like us to analyze in upcoming videos, feel free to suggest it. And don't forget to follow the channel to stay updated with more interesting content. Thank you for staying with us until the end of the video, and see you again in the next episodes.